Hi, my name is Gregg Early. I am executive editor at KCI Communications. I write at theselevels.com fairly regularly. Also the Twitter off of there. And I do a free e-zine called New Tech Investor. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about, and I'm also associate editor of New World 3.0 with Roger Conrad. And most recently I wrote an article for New World about solar energy. And the beginning of that article talked about the general frustration I have in the United States with what's becoming a bigger and bigger issue with the new infrastructure and our building out the grid and catching up with a lot of the developed world regarding the way we incorporate renewable energy into our power structure. The big terms that we talk about are distributed power and centralized power. Centralized power is what we have. It's the grid that's 100 years old. It's essentially a system where you have a giant power generator like a nuclear facility or a coal-fired plant or something like that that's producing enormous amounts of power, and then it's shipped usually from its remote area all the way to a populated area where they don't generally have these power plants. Along the line, what happens is with this centralized power system is that you get what they call dirty power. That the copper cables that are running this wire or running this electricity generally aren't the most, they are the most efficient carriers of electricity, but they're not totally efficient. So you lose about a third of the power. So, whatever's generated at the plant, by the time it gets to you, through the substations, through the relay sites and everything else, you're getting about 70% of that power if you're lucky. Well, back when we had cheap energy and we didn't really care about, the coal and the sulfur oxide and the nitrous oxide emissions, that was okay. 70% was fine. Better than half, and we were still doing well. Nowadays, losing 30% is a big deal, not only for the consumer and for the environmentalists, but also for the coal companies and for the power companies. They want every ounce of that to get to the consumer so that they have to generate less, they have to build less factories or power plants, they have to buy less coal, they have to buy less natural gas or whatever it might be. So the model that most modern nations are going to, most industrialized modern nations, and what Europe has in general is what they call a distributed power. And what you do in a distributed model is that you have smaller generating facilities. So that instead of having one giant one, you have ones that are smaller but closer to the power source of the locality of where you're trying to ship the power. So it doesn't have to travel as far, and you don't have as much to generate. So these smaller models then are more efficient in being able to put power onto the grid. Also, the problem with the centralized model is when you add in things like solar or wind or something along those lines, renewable energies. The problem you have is that then you have to back that up with what they call shadow plant or shadow power, which is generally, so if you're producing 2 gigawatts of electricity with solar power, well, when the sun isn't shining, you need to replace that 2 gigawatts with something else, and what they generally replace it with is a natural gas-fired power plant. So for all the electricity that you put on with renewable energy, it gets taken off because you have to support it with regular fossil fuel energy. Now in a distributed grid, you don't have to do that. Distributed grid can take the power and move it around. It's what they call in the United States a smart grid. It's what hopefully we're going to get to. But if you think that where we are now is going to make the smart grid happen, you're wrong. What we need to do is start moving towards this smart grid. We need to start moving to distributed power. or none of these renewables or biofuels or anything else that's going to help us get off of foreign oil or get out of polluting fossil fuels is actually ever going to work. We won't have the ability to get to where we need to go in the 21st century if we continue to use the century-old model of centralized power distribution. So that's my little lesson for today, and I'll be back. And if you want more, go to newworld3.com and check out my article if you can get in, if you're a subscriber. And if not, go to kciinvesting.com, where under featured articles, I have a little intro about this, and I talk about a couple companies that are in this space. Well, thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you soon.